finite, even though our aspirations and dreams and hopes might be infinite. So that's just kind of the mindset piece. So when things happen, especially around death or loss, there's this sense that I now have, and maybe it's a mindset or spiritual piece, whatever you want to call it, is like what's the lesson here? What am I being taught? How can I grow from this experience? And so that's the first thing that I think helps not become a victim to experience, but instead to be a willing participant in the experience of day-to-day lives, is whether it's good, good in air quotes, or whether it's bad in air quotes, just really thinking like, what's there to learn from here? How does this change my experience? How does this change the way that I understand the world?
Absolutely.
And going from there, because I think when you do that, you recognize that life is this mixture of things that show up. And just because you're going through your own cage match right now doesn't mean you're defective, or doesn't mean that the universe is out to get you, or it doesn't mean that you shouldn't do your work. It just means you're human. Like, welcome to this journey.
With all its pain, with all the struggles.
And with all its pain, with all its triumphs, with all its joy, with all its hurt. And fundamentally, again, going back to that death piece, not to stay there too long, there are some people who go to bed and don't wake up the next day, right? Or they wake up the next day and they don't have another sleep or another, physical sleep.
Right.
So just recognize that every day is that gift. Every day is that gift of learning. Every day you've got this ability to really show up and benefit those around you, benefit yourselves. And I understand what I want to say here is on the sidebar, like, because I'm familiar with depression. I haven't been diagnosed with depression. I'm not a depressed sort of, like, that's not something that shows up for me, but I know people that do have that as part of their journey. I know all of this, like, wake up and show up and, life is a good thing. It might not resonate, and that's okay. Right. And so there are times when that doesn't work for certain people. But when you step back and you get the support you need, and you really live life to the fullest. And as Roosevelt, the man in the arena quote, when you get in the arena, yes, you are going to get some knots, and yes, you are going to fall down and chew some dirt and so on and so forth. But life is so much better lived in the arena than not. So that's the mindset piece. The other piece that I've learned for myself, and this is actually really hard, Charles, because at a certain point you become, in the coaching world, we would say you become unconsciously competent, right? So you go through different levels of competence and conscious. And so at the very bottom level, you're unconsciously incompetent. Like, you don't know what you don't know how to do and what you don't know.
Right.
And then you become consciously incompetent. You know what you don't know, or you know what you can't do. And then you become consciously competent, where you know what you know and you know what you can do. And maybe people think that that's the pinnacle of experience. It's actually not. It's that unconscious competence where you're just naturally, effortlessly capable of doing great things, right? You're just really in the pocket, as it were. Now, the challenge as a teacher and as a creative, especially when you do a lot of non-fic stuff, I don't do, fictional stuff. I also don't create art in the aesthetic art in the way that you can think about it that way. Once you reach that point of unconscious competence, it's actually really hard to figure out what you're going to write about, because you already know it, right? You don't have the problems that you used to have, and you don't realize that other people have those problems and challenges and desires. And so I know for me, the sheer sign that I am not going to be creative is when I'm stuck by myself. And so staying in community with people and making sure that I'm focusing not just on creating and consumption, which is the sort of way that many people look at creativity. Like, there's stuff that you create and you put out there in the world, and there's stuff that you consume. A critical piece of this is who you connect with and how you connect with them. And so it's making sure that I'm having these moments, like, say, on this podcast, or that I'm talking to readers, or that I'm working with a client, or that I'm giving a workshop where I am getting out of my own head, my own competence, my own unconscious, and being in the day-to-day trenches with people. It's just one of those ways that I show up. And it sounds funny, but I have to get to the point to where I either engineer or it just happens to me. But I have to have catalytic moments like those meetings with readers and customers, or those workshops. And otherwise, I'll get, easiest word is complacent. I'll just be like, I'm good for now. I've written. I write every day. I create something every day. I talk to people every day. But there's this way in which you can do that, but you're not really shipping your best work.
Right.
And I know for me to ship my best work that I really do have to have those catalytic moments and deadlines.
Yeah.
Or I'm just going to kind of cruise for a while.
Well, it's good to have habits. And I've been reading a good bit about, again, reminding myself the habit of having habits. And sometimes that habit of the habit keeps you going and doing things, which keeps the gears moving.
Mm-hmm.
But to create better work has to be an intentional process as well. And, often I think we're doing that and we get caught in a term that you use that I also love using is the thrash. You get into that thrash of the work, and it's difficult to see whether anything that's coming out of it is of merit and worth, or you're just thrashing. When you were talking during your presentation about that process of finishing, you talked about the thrash and its place in in every meaningful project. Do you want to unfold that a little bit?
Yeah. So the thing about it is, every meaningful project is going to have thrash, as Charles just said, right? And the challenge becomes for many people, many creatives, is that the more it matters, the more they'll thrash, right? The more your inner critics and demons and, antagonists will come up and defy you. And sometimes they go guerrilla and do all sorts of weird things to you. And so really a lot of times what happens is people look at this and they say, oh, this project's really hard. Like, I'm not getting anywhere. It must be that I'm doing the wrong thing. I should be working on something else. And I think that's a terrible way of thinking about it. Now, it could be that you're doing things the hard way, because I don't know why, Charles, but we as humans, we tend to love to do things the hard way. Like if I said, hey, Charles, okay, so here's what you need to do to be successful with your podcast. Here, do these 7 things. Do not err from these 7 things. You would rebel, right? You're like, maybe it doesn't fit me. Maybe I could do it a little bit different. Maybe I could try this other thing. Like, maybe Charles wouldn't, but a lot of people will rebel and reject those 7 things, right?
Yeah, I'm laughing at myself. Yeah.
What?
I resemble that remark.
Yeah, because you're like, no, that doesn't fit me. I'm going to do it better. Like, there's the other way that it's got. It's like, no, here are the 7 things that you need to do. And so we have this tendency as humans to make, especially as creative people, to make our life so much harder than it need, make our projects so much harder than it need to be. Case in point. I have a story about this, and I wish this guy well, but he contacted me and he said, hey, Charlie, I really want to grow my blog, but I want to grow my written blog, but I don't like writing and I'm not good at it. And I don't but I still want to do it. What do you think I should do to grow my blog? And I wrote him back and I said, I don't think that you should have a written blog. Because he mentioned also in there, I'm telling the story terribly. He mentioned that it's like, I love speaking and, I really get fired up about speaking, but I want to have this. And I was like, am I being punked here? Like, is it not obvious to him that, like, if he's not good at writing and he doesn't want to write and he's been struggling with it for a long time, that maybe he shouldn't be doing that?
Do a podcast.
Maybe you should do a podcast, right? And that's what I told him. Maybe you should do a podcast. Maybe you should do screencast as opposed to having written blogs, because he was in the tech, like he wanted to help people with the technical side of blogging. And I was like, maybe you should do screencast. He responded back, and I don't remember what the response back, but I checked in on him about 3 months later and he was still not really gone that far. But that's one of those examples where, like, we don't take what we're good at, I have an acronym for this, GATES, like you're opening a gate, but plural. So genius, affinities, talents, expertise, and strengths. We don't start from our gates of creativity. We try to start on the things that are hard. We start on those blockers. I think part of it is because we have, in our culture, we have this myth that the person who works the hardest deserves what they get the most, right? So if you work really hard, you'll get the rewards. But we also don't have this idea of like, if you just do what you're really naturally good at, that serves other people's needs, that lights you up, that gets it done, that's good enough. You got to work harder, right, Charles? You got to work harder.
Yeah, I had an assistant, actually a couple of assistants years ago that we'd go out to do photo shoots, and several times it came up. They'd say, "Do you only pick things that are hard? Do you have to climb to the top of the tree to pick the hardest fruit all the time?" And so I got a reputation for only trying to do the things that were hard, and it took a long time to realize that I just had the sense that I had to do the hardest work and would not pick the easy fruit along the way. It's okay to go and do the difficult stuff, but it's okay to pick the easy fruit, the low-hanging stuff on your way up the tree as well. It's just as good.
It's just as good, and I want to, as much as I could be nuanced here, I want to make the distinction between really showing up and doing your best work versus trying to do things like that are just naturally hard for you, to do things in a way that are hard for you. So,
right.
There's a big distinction there, because even when you are working from your gates, you're still going to get some thrash, and it's still, to do your best work, it's still going to be hard. But there's a big difference between doing stuff that was from your gates and my guy who wanted to be the written blogger, who was just doing something and he was going to have to work harder. So let's pause here. I know I seem all over the board today, but I'm having fun. So hopefully that's okay.
That's what we're here for.
We don't like, in this abundant space of creativity, we don't like to think about the flip side of competition, but they both exist, just like death and life exist at the same time, right? So there's a lot of ways in which we can make the pie bigger. And there's a lot of ways in which people's attention and energy and resources in time are limited. And that's where competition comes from. If you are a creative professional, or you're a leader out there and you're trying to lead your team and it's in a competitive scenario, once you reach that plateau where all the low-hanging fruit is done and all of the easy parts of the project or your initiative are going to be done, you're going to be competing against other people. Now, if those other people have built their team based upon their genius, affinities, talents, expertise, and strengths, and you have not, in the end, that team is going to win, because they are going to not have to work nearly as hard to ship their projects, to really have the impact that they want to really build a community, whatever it is that they're trying to do. At that plateau point, they're not going to have to be struggling and fighting nearly as hard as you are. And so any project that you do at a sort of analogous level, you're working your tail off. They're showing up to work and having a blast. They're going to win in the end. They are going to win in the end. So don't be the team that's working the hard way. Be the team that's working from your gates,
Right. Yeah, that's a good point.
The thing about the thrash, and I know I took a diversion there because we needed to talk about doing things the hard way. The thing about thrash is it's always going to show up, and people lure themselves into thinking that, okay, when it gets hard, there's some other easier project that I can jump to, right? That sounds this bright, shiny object project over there. I'm going to jump over there. Well, guess what? That project's going to have some thrash to it as well.
Absolutely.
And if you have this string of unfinished projects, some are going to be your best work projects. Others are going to be those easier side projects that you thought you'd done. At the end of the day, as a creative person, and as a person in general, you're going to start demotivating yourself and start lacking confidence in yourself. And that next project that comes up, there's going to be that demon that's going to be down there in your pocket saying, hey, oh, we got another project coming in. What about these other ones? Those worked out really well for you, didn't they? Oh, yeah. So just another thing, right? Oh, yeah, this one's going to be easy. Like those other ones were, right? And that starts to nag at you, right? So the point of finishing, and why I focus so much on finishing your best work, is that you are able to write another story about that, right? you can write the story instead of having that slew of unfinished projects. You could write the story that, you know what,